This is Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 635, part 2, entitled A Masculist's Duty to Harangue Monoconscious Feminazi Bigots, MFBs. Continuing straight on. Feminism has had a monopoly over gender politics for half a century, so most women, unless they are like me in their 70s, have grown up all their lives with feminist ideas, which has taught them to despise men for the ways that men oppress women. Bi-conscious masculists, in brackets, who have had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, close brackets, don't deny that men oppress women, for example, rape, sexual harassment, domestic violence, etc., but do deny the implicit claim of the feminists that gender oppression is a one-way street, and argue that women's oppression of men is far worse, since women's big three worst ways of oppressing men, listed above, are truly horrible and last decades. So bi-conscious masculists have no patience nor tolerance towards monoconscious feminists and crush them when they come across them, seeing MFBs as both hypocrites and genociders. Hypocrites, since fluffy feminists want equal rights with men in the parliaments, but expect to behave as fluffies in the divorce courts, parasiting off the labour and money of her ex-husband, butchering him and destroying his life at the rate of one father in 4. A major war issue for the masculists, who aim to wipe out fluffies and fluffy feminists by exterminating them slowly, by totally ignoring them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, dying slow, miserable deaths. Most see fluffy feminists as genociders, since as fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges, they have made divorce so toxic for men that they have made marriage and paternity toxic for men. In a fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court system in many Western countries, a divorcing father will lose custody of his kids with a 90% probability. He will lose his house to his ex-wife so she can raise her kids in it. He will lose half his wealth and stuff to her. He'll be forced to make child payments towards his kids, whom he will barely be allowed to see, perhaps twice a month in the weekends. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may have to pay her alimony until he dies, with no moral nor legal obligation on her to fit up. So she continues to leech off him after the divorce the way she did before the divorce, due to the fluffy expectations of these fluffy feminists who butcher men's lives, seeing men as cash machines to pay for women to have babies. The fact that this butchery occurs to one father in 4 in many countries is such a massive gender crime against men that it is no surprise that masculists have a burning hatred against fluffy feminists who indirectly wipe out whole populations. That is, they are seen by masculists as genociders, since in many countries they have caused 2/3 of young men to reject marriage and paternity, who choose to live the MGTOW, MGTOW lifestyle, men going their own way, who spend their money on themselves and absolutely refuse to face a 1 chance in 4 of being butchered by the hated fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts. So masculists harangue MFBs in order to destroy them, to make their lives so unpleasant and to suffer so badly by not having a man nor children in their lives, that their lives are made miserable, thus strongly motivating these women to become bi-conscious and lose their feminazi bitchery by having their monoconscious feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women, that feminism teaches, cancelled by their female masculist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. Masculists claim that it's very much in a monoconscious feminist's self-interest to become bi-conscious, since that way she will lose her monoconscious anger at men for the reasons given just above, and hence will be happier in life, since she will be more likely to have and to keep a boyfriend. Relationships between the sexes now have got so bad that in the US now, if a young woman expresses publicly to her social circle that she's a feminist, then a potential boyfriend will probably just dump her on the spot. When monoconscious feminazi bigots, brackets, who are so close-minded, hence bigoted, that they can't accept the idea that gender oppression is a two-way street due to their lifelong indoctrination by feminism that gender oppression is a one-way street, close brackets, are confronted by bi-conscious masculists, they suffer cognitive dissonance and reject with hostility the idea that the monoconscious dogma they have been taught by feminism is actually a piece of misandrist, gynocentric propaganda that is toxic to them, to men, and to society. This massive realization is too much for most monoconscious feminists, so they reject bi-consciousing. They reject masculist ideas and hence seem bigots, obnoxious, repulsive, feminazi bigots to bi-conscious masculists. The above few paragraphs have explained why masculists should harangue MFBs for the sake of women. This haranguing on the part of the masculists you could call tough love. Forcing women to become bi-conscious is very much in their self-interest, since 99.5% of women are heterosexual. So even the most rabid of feminazis is still dependent on men for her sex. So it's very much in her self-interest to be nicer to men if she wants the man in her life to stick around and not dump her once he has had his masculine consciousness raised and sees her monoconscious feminazi bigotry as oppressive, repulsive, and then dumps her. As society becomes bi-conscious, as masculine ideas spread across the planet, then millions of women will be made a lot happier due to having absorbed masculist ideas, making them bi-conscious and hence made much more likable for men, who today typically reject MFBs, seeing them as repulsive, to be rejected, to rot on the shelf. Now for the third part. Why should masculists harangue MFBs for the sake of society? Question mark. Feminism is genocidal. It is indirectly wiping out whole populations due to the toxicity it has created in the divorce courts, which has caused 2/3 of young men in many countries to reject marriage and paternity. The masculists want monoconscious feminists to become bi-conscious by haranguing them, threatening them with manlessness, childlessness, etc. if they don't fib up and vote with men for the men-fairing of the gender laws, the reform of the divorce courts, which should be based on the principle that all women are FIPs, so that fluffies are seen as a thing of the past, so that new men-fair gender laws are legislated, such as the paternity rejection right, so that men are given the same right as women to reject an unwanted pregnancy. If the woman goes ahead with the pregnancy, then as a FIP, she can afford to pay for the costs of the kid for herself. Masculists want GECs, Gender Equality Committees, to be set up in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which is far from being the case today, in today's heavily biased, gynocentric gender political culture. Masculism needs to educate society that gender oppression is a two-way street, so that the whole of society benefits, so that men are much more prepared to be fathers again, who are given equal rights with women, e.g. the para and the OPTAB, OPTAB, obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to block women's paternity fraud. Masculists want paternity frauding women to be put in jail for 15 years. If whole populations are not to be wiped out, fundamental reforms in the gender laws and gender in the gender roles and gender laws need to be implemented, and this will involve an extensive knowledge on the part of the politicians of masculist ideas. These gender politicians will need to be made as conscious of masculist thinking as they are currently of feminist thinking. That is, they need to have their monoconsciousness expanded to bi-consciousness. And that means, by definition, that they'll have to learn a lot more about masculism. And for that to happen, masculists have a strong moral duty to harangue MFBs into bi-consciousness, so that the whole of society becomes bi-conscious, so that the gender laws are men-fared and society does not get wiped out. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 630 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. These flyers are available in text and video formats on Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, and MGTOW.tv. Ciao.